I welcome you one and all to the series. What is the sin of adultery? And what are the ways that we can become guilty of the sin? Well, this is what we hope to explore in this presentation. The book of Exodus chapter 20 verse 14 is our text, and it states, "You shall not commit adultery." Adultery, we know, is a sexual intimacy engaged in by a married person with another who is not the spouse. Adultery breaks the promise of permanent commitment or fidelity to one's spouse. During the exchange of consent, the couple promises fidelity to each other till death. By committing adultery, this vow is broken, and it is a social injustice to one's spouse. It must also be emphasized that this commandment extends the strict meaning of the word adultery. It requires us to avoid all impurity or immodesty, either physically or spiritually. Jesus, we know, says, and I quote, "You have heard that it was said that you shall not commit adultery. But I tell you that anyone who looks at a woman lustfully has already committed adultery with her in his heart," unquote. Matthew chapter 5, verse 27-28. What is Jesus implying? He's teaching us about chastity, which is the virtue to enable us restrain all our sexual desires or immodest desires which fall outside the context of marriage. When we try to remain pure in thought, what happens is that we empower ourselves against the sin of lust, which is the root cause of adultery. What are the sins against the virtue of chastity, which give us the broader perspective of the commandment under consideration? 1. Masturbation. Masturbation, we know, is a self-induced pleasure. The point is that all voluntary sexual activity or pleasure outside of marriage is objectively and seriously wrong. 2. Fornication. Fornication, we know, is a sexual intimacy engaged in by unmarried persons, and it is forbidden by this commandment. Fornication is wrong because God intends the sexual act to be an expression of love and responsibility, and fornication seeks pleasure without responsibility. 3. Pornography. Pornography removes the marital act from the intimacy of a loving marriage relationship, and it depersonalizes it for a deliberate display to others. It further destroys the dignity of those who create, sell, and use it to arouse their passion. 4. Prostitution. It debases those who sell their bodies for money or property, and it seriously violates the virtue of chastity in those who pay for it. And 5. Rape. It is always seriously and intrinsically evil to rape someone. By the use of force, one's freedom to express love sexually is seriously damaged, and it is an affront to the dignity of the rape victim. Rape violates both justice and love. The link to this is the sexual abuse of children. It damages them forever. To conclude, the commandment, "You shall not commit adultery," requires us to maintain the sanctity of the marriage vocation by keeping the marriage bed undefiled. Again, the commandment requires us to avoid all other forms of sexual sins. By pursuing the virtue of chastity, we fight against the sin of lust, which is the root cause of adultery. Since Rome was not built in a day, it's important to reflect on how to build the virtue of chastity from the days of our youth, so that when we grow, adultery will not be a challenge. Relationships and marriages are breaking up because of infidelity. Sexual sin today has been normalized to the extent that chastity is no longer attractive. The truth is that we cannot desire good relationships or marriages when we see nothing wrong with entertaining lustful desires. For Jesus, it is only when we are able to control our lustful desires that we can avoid adultery. That is why chastity is a virtue to cultivate. The earlier the young ones are taught to appreciate this virtue, the better their relationships or marriages will be. May God bless you all. Amen.